people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. A week ago in the women's super bantamweight division, former champions Deborah Dionicius and multi-weight Argentinian boxing legend Marcela Acuña battled it out for what was the WBO's interim title at 122 pounds. This essentially lines up Deborah Dionicius, who won a points decision. This lines her up for a shot at the full title. The full title that unbeaten Sigaline Lefebvre of France used to hold, but was very recently stripped of. Seems almost redundant that the WBO elected to strip Sigaline Lefebvre of that WBO title when she was injured. She wasn't out of competition for no reason. She underwent surgery for what was a hand injury, and as a result of being out of action briefly, the WBO elected to strip her of that WBO title. The only inference I can make now is that the WBO will now move to make a fight between Sigaline Lefebvre and Deborah Dionicius at some point next year. That is assuming that the WBO doesn't elect to elevate Deborah to WBO champion straight away without a contest. Her being the WBO's super bantamweight interim champion, they could do that too. But would border on chicanery to have stripped Sigaline Lefebvre so abruptly of her WBO title for being injured just to elevate Deborah Dionicius to full champion without a contest. I think the minimum they can do is stage a fight between them. Order a fight between Sigaline Lefebvre and Deborah Dionicius. It's only right. Deborah Dionicius, who has in effect breathed a second wind into her career. It was in April of last year when she dropped a unanimous decision to Gloria Yangsakeo, a journeywoman with an upside-down record. You don't expect a fighter of Deborah's caliber to drop a decision to a journeywoman with an upside-down record. She rebounded off that loss with yet another journeywoman in Lilian Silva, who also had an upside-down record, en route to a showdown with Marcela Acuña. This was Marcela Acuña and Deborah Dionicius' first meeting in November of last year. This past fight they just had last week, that was the rematch. She won the first fight with Marcela Acuña by way of a points decision, dropped a decision to Brenda Carbajal, rebounded off that loss with Lilian Silva. It's the same Lilian Dolores Silva from before. Took on another journeywoman with an upside-down record in Antelena Molina en route to the Acuña rematch that she won, the rematch that she won last week for WBO interim status. So as stated, Deborah Dionicius, a few hiccups and bumps on the road aside, she's given her career a second win. Now she is in line to become this division's full-fledged WBO champion. Should she be elevated straight away, without a contest, without a mandate, mandating that she face the former champion Sigaline Lefebvre, well, I don't actually like Deborah's chances against any of the other champions at this weight. Venezuela's Mayerlin Rivas, WBA champion. Yamilet Mercado of Mexico, reigning WBC champion. And newly crowned IBF champion of New Zealand, Australian-based Nika Johnson, who's going to be in action very soon opposite the ring, unbeaten up-and-comer Ellie Scotney. Catford. I don't actually like Deborah's chances against any of the titleists at this weight. In truth, if a fight between her and Sigaline Lefebvre is ordered, I don't like her chances against Sigaline. Sigaline is a lot younger than Deborah Dionicius, who's 34 years old. Sigaline is 29. She's 5 years younger than Deborah Dionicius with an unblemished record. She's an unbeaten fighter, a former unbeaten champion. And to the eye is a longer, rangier fighter than Deborah Dionicius. Deborah may have experience on her side, but not youth and not freshness. Not really. In fact, in a potential contest between Sigaline and Deborah. I think the only thing that would be working for Deborah, aside from her experience, is the fact that Siegeline is coming off a surgery.
But that said, I'm fairly confident Siegeline can win that fight if that fight gets ordered.
I think it should. I think it was wrong of the WBO to strip Siegeline Lefebvre of the WBO title under those circumstances. She was injured. What the hell was she supposed to do?
It's not like a bunch of time passed without Siegeline defending that title. She defended it successfully earlier this year in May.
I feel like the WBO need to make it right, and they need to order a fight between Siegeline and Deborah Dionicius. Let's see if they do at some point next year.
There's a proliferation of talent anywhere in between the bantamweight division and the featherweight division. That's 118, 122, all the way up to 126.
Major promotional outfits with broadcast partners have ponies in all of these shows, anywhere from bantamweight, super bantamweight, up to featherweight. Now's a good time to campaign at or around these weights. And Siegeline Lefebvre,
She needs to get that title back.
anywhere from Matchroom to Boxer to Queensbury, they got ponies in that pocket. Ponies anywhere in between 118 and 126 pounds.
She's got to reintegrate herself into that world title picture, and hopefully the WBO does the right thing and orders a fight between them, a fight between Siegeline Lefebvre and Deborah Dionicius.
Men's lightweight news on the heels of Gervonta Davis's latest domestic dispute, his latest fiasco. The mother of his child posted this to her Instagram stories, a caption that reads, "The past days have been hurtful, an extremely exhausting time for all parties involved. I pride myself on being extremely private. This situation was the last thing I wanted to be made public. The state of our relationship has been in a fragile space, and Gervonta and I were both at fault for the argument. While emotions were running high, I made an unnecessary call to law enforcement in an immense moment while I was frantic."
You believe this shit?
Gervonta did not harm me or our daughter. Today, we have sought the help necessary to move forward with our lives. I am confident that we will succeed within our co-parenting dynamic with the counseling provided to us. That reads almost like it was written by a lawyer.
But I'll take it at face value, because essentially what she's saying is she made it all up when she said that he's going to kill her.
If we take this all at face value, essentially what this means is that she was overreacting, that Gervonta Davis never struck her, that her life was never in any immediate danger as a result of that domestic dispute they were having, that, according to her, was little more than a verbal spat.
You called the cops because you still got in an argument.
Well, I don't envy Gervonta Davis if that's the case, though whether or not that's the case is open to debate, open to interpretation. She's taking it all back.
Preliminary reports indicated that she was struck. Preliminary reports indicated that she was struck with a closed slap.
Struck with a closed hand. How do you go from telling the cops that this guy hit you to he never laid a finger on me?
It's a wildly different account of events.
Didn't they say that she suffered an abrasion?
Inside her lip.
The cops said Gervonta Davis roughed up a woman in Florida on a Tuesday afternoon, but where did the cops get that account of events? Where'd they get that story? Presumably from the mother of his child, who is now saying that she was frantic.
And made it all up?
This not being Gervonta Davis's first rodeo, not being his first domestic dispute, he had a more public incident.
That's a big part of the reason this became a witch hunt.
Because it wasn't his first rodeo. The domestic dispute that played out publicly, the reports of Gervonta Davis threatening Ari.
I think the report said he threatened to shoot her in the face.
These previous situations are what contributed to the traction that this story gained just a few days ago.
A few days later, what his lady friend is saying in so many words is that she made it all up because she was frantic.
Gervonta Davis, throughout this entire fiasco, has asserted his innocence, saying quite plainly that he never laid a finger on this woman, and her story seems to corroborate his a few days later. He never actually struck her, never actually touched her. So where'd the abrasion come from?
Well, was there an abrasion in connection with this dispute?
We can talk for hours about the varying intricacies of just these kinds of situations and how getting to the bottom of things, getting to the truth, can be more difficult than it appears. It's just as likely that she leveraged this situation, knowing Gervonta Davis's history, his run-ins with the law. It's just as likely that the mother of his child did this, knowing what might happen just as easily as
She could have made the whole thing up knowing that he's had previous domestic disputes, knowing that his guilt would be assumed.
That could be the situation, could be the case, just as easily as her silence could have been bought.
Gervonta Davis said this whole thing was about her not being able to drive his truck.
You've got her side of the story, his side of the story, and the truth. The truth that only the both of them know, whoever was actually there.
So it's her side of the story that has changed in the last day or so, and one is left to wonder why.
I think that many of the fight fans that frequent this channel are less concerned with Gervonta Davis's tumultuous home life and the toxic dichotomy of his relationship. But there is a feeling in some circles, small ones, that now Gervonta Davis is owed an apology, when in truth, if anybody owes him an apology, it's the mother of his child, not me or you. She's the one who accused him of hitting her. Me and you don't owe him shit.
She's the one who called the cops on him.
Context is key. This not being his first domestic dispute. We saw one that played out more publicly.
There's the court of law and a court of public opinion. And in a court of public opinion, you're not owed the benefit of the doubt by proxy.
For those of you out there that think that's the way the world works, want to think that's the way the world works, I'm sorry to break the news to you that it doesn't. If anyone owes Gervonta Davis anything, it's the mother of his child for saying, in so many words, that she made up this entire fiasco, that he never actually struck her, and she was frantic when she placed the 911 call, saying she was in fear of her life.
Feared for it.
She said he was gonna kill her. Now she's saying he never touched her.
Ma'am, can you help me? Ma'am, repeat the address. I need to send Eunice to you. I need the address. Please help me. He's gonna kill me. Ma'am, what's the address?
If you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, I can believe that she made the whole thing up to spite him just as easily as I can believe that her silence was bought.
Neither would surprise me. Because of his previous history.
And because of the glaring differences in her story from the time she placed the 911 call till now. You're talking about two very different situations. You told the cops you feared for your life. You're saying now you had no reason to. You were just frantic.
There's something to be said about that.
But the one thing that doesn't need to be said is, I'm sorry. Neither I nor you owe Gervonta Davis anything. We don't owe him an apology. She does.
Oh, you might owe the tax man tax money at tax time.
You might go out with your buddies and one of them picks up the tab.
Right.
You might owe him one.
But you don't owe Gervonta Davis an apology for what is his toxic relationship.
If we take this entire story at face value, it's his own fault for impregnating some toxic broad that's willing to make up stories on a 911 call about being struck when nobody laid a hand on her.
That's your problem.
You picked her, and you didn't pull out.
That's if you, in your own mind's eye, decide to take this entire fiasco at face value. That's if you do. If you don't.
If you think that there's more going on here than meets the eye, there's reason to.
She could be, in theory, protecting her abuser. That happens.
Unfortunately, it does. In some domestic violence incidents, it could be that she's protecting him. It could be that her silence was bought just as easily as it could be that she made the whole thing up to extort him.
Nothing would surprise me.
So as this pertains to boxing, it doesn't look like this domestic dispute is going to have any effect on Gervonta Davis's upcoming match with Hector Garcia.
A fight many people thought was in jeopardy as a result of this playing out publicly.
According to Gervonta Davis's lady friend, this was all much ado about nothing. Now that Gervonta Davis is free to resume his boxing career, on to more boxing-related news. Adrian Broner says Shakur Stevenson would be the most difficult fight for Tank. That's assuming that Gervonta Tank Davis, ever faces him.
I don't think he will.
Though I do share in that sentiment. Adrian Broner, the multi-division champion from Cincinnati, Ohio, was recently asked about how a potential fight between Baltimore's Davis and Shakur Stevenson would play out. Broner, who is close friends with Davis, refrained from offering a purely partisan opinion, saying that he thinks Stevenson is the one fighter who would give Davis the most difficult time in the ring. If I had to, it's not a mystery. Broner told Fight Hub during a press conference in Omaha, Nebraska to announce his February 18th fight against Ivan Redkach. In my opinion, Shakur Stevenson would be the most difficult fight for Tank. But what it takes to figure out any fighter, he's got what it takes to adjust. To do what he's got to do to get the victory. Shakur Stevenson would probably be the one that gives him the most difficult fight in the ring. Coincidentally, Shakur Stevenson, he is one of two fighters that Floyd Mayweather, back when Floyd was in the Gervonta Davis business, he's one of two fighters who Floyd advised to just leave Gervonta Davis alone.
Please.
Let him do his thing.
Please.
Let him keep fighting fighters that, for the most part, everyone favors him to beat.
In box office fights that no one was clamoring for.
You know, a big part of the reason that I think Gervonta Davis will end up going his whole career not sharing the ring with the likes of a Shakur Stevenson is that would require him to either cross over to the ESPN Top Rank side of things or enter into a co-promotional situation. The people at the PBC...
Gervonta Davis might have left Mayweather Promotions, at least temporarily, but he still fights under the PBC banner.
Al Heyman is still in the picture. Al Heyman is still his advisor. Thus, in order to do a fight between a Davis and a Stevenson, you'd need to reach a co-promotional arrangement similar to the one that they worked out between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder for their second and third fights.
And you see what happened in those fights. Do you think that the PBC wants more situations like those?
You say that the Ryan Garcia fight, what's supposed to be the Ryan Garcia fight, assuming that fight ever even happens, the deal structure seems like a co-promotional deal structure involving both the PBC and Golden Boy Promotions, both Showtime and DAZN.
You say that Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia seems like a co-promotional situation, but one, that fight hasn't actually happened yet. We haven't crossed that finish line. And even if we do, Ryan Garcia is not a carbon copy of Shakur Stevenson. Shakur's a two-division champion.
Whereas Ryan Garcia is a contender at contender level at best. He may very well be a cut above an Isaac Cruz or a cut above a Rolly Romero, but that's not saying much.
In some circles, though not all, but some, Shakur Stevenson is already ranked amongst the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. Perhaps not top 5, perhaps not in the top tier, the lower bracket, but still, that's where he is.
You can't use potentially making a fight with a Ryan Garcia as a parallel for potentially making a fight with Shakur Stevenson because they're in very different places in their careers.
Even if they are both young guys from this generation, Shakur Stevenson has been a champion at two weights. Ryan Garcia has yet to fight for a full-fledged title.
I'm sorry to say this, it's not a knock on Ryan Garcia, at least it's not intended to be, but Ryan is perceived in many circles as being a more beatable fighter than Shakur Stevenson.
He is perceived as being a more beatable fighter that provides a bigger financial incentive than Shakur Stevenson. Shakur is a high-risk, low-reward guy to Gervonta Davis.
Compared to Ryan, he is. Ryan Garcia, who Gervonta is supposed to be facing next year in the second quarter, should he end up beating Hector Garcia.
So, one isn't a parallel for the other.
Even if Gervonta Davis does end up sharing the ring with Ryan, that in no way, shape, or form guarantees that he will ever share the ring with Shakur. And I like Adrian Broner. Not only do I think he'd give Gervonta the most problems, I think he'd beat him.
I've said that more than once.